Let me say something right out the gate that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, especially business owners. If you're running a 1099 but you do not control your schedule, your loads, your money, or your decisions, you're not independent. You are what we call controlled labor. And today, I want to really slow this conversation down and explain, how that happens, why it keeps spreading across trucking, and why so many drivers feel trapped but can't quite explain why. Because this isn't about taxes, it never was. Every time 1099 abuse comes up, the conversation gets hijacked. People start yelling that 1099 is illegal, that 1099 is a scam, that all 1099 is bad, that anyone defending 1099 must be corrupt or ignorant. Um, and that framing is wrong. And it's really, really dangerous because 1099 is a tax classification. It's nothing more and it's nothing less. It does not define freedom, it does not define fairness, and it does not define abuse. Control does. And until drivers understand that, this problem is going to keep repeating itself under new names and new contracts every single day. You see, independence has nothing to do with paperwork, it has everything to do with who holds authority. So let's define reality instead of marketing. A legitimate independent contractor controls when they work. They control which loads they take. They can refuse freight without retaliation. They control how they operate. They have access to all of their numbers and they can verify deductions and they can walk away without punishment. Okay? That is not radical. That is not controversial. That is the baseline definition of real independence. And yes, real 1099s set up. They exist. We've reviewed them. We have analyzed them. We have seen the settlements. We've seen drivers thrive in some of these structures. Some of them are genuinely life changing. But let's be honest about this part. That's not what most drivers are being sold, and that's not what they're doing. Most drivers are being sold a title, while the structure underneath never changes. And here's where the abuse actually begins. If a company dispatches you like an employee, tells you where to run, penalizes you for refusing loads, controls routing and fuel, they dictate when you take time off, they require exclusive service and write down deductions you can't challenge, calling you independent is fiction. That is misclassification. You are doing employee work under contractor risk with none of the protections of either. You see, this is not entrepreneurship. That is exploitation with better branding. And this is where things get subtle because the system doesn't rely on force, it relies on a lot of pressure. Companies will say you're free to leave. Nobody forced you to sign. You knew what you were getting into. You are your own boss. But if leaving means losing your escrow or being hit with exit fees, having settlements held, getting charged for things you never agreed to, or being financially wrecked on the way out, that's not freedom. What that is coercion disguised as choice. Real independence includes exit power. And if you cannot leave cleanly, you are never independent to begin with. Let's talk about the place where control always shows up eventually: money. because you could spot abuse faster in a settlement than in a contract. We do this every day. In most abusive 1099 structures, you'll see forced fuel cards, mandatory insurance programs, maintenance charges you can't audit, escrows with no clear accounting, and admin fees no one can explain that just pops up one random whenever they want. Settlements that change week to week without no transparency. And we see this in here. You don't control pricing. You don't get to negotiate rates. You don't own the customer. You don't approve deductions. But you're told you're running a business. That's not business ownership. It's financial dependency by design. And here's the part drivers rarely get told up front. Control over money is control over behavior. If a company controls how you get paid, they control what you will tolerate. They control how long you will stay, and they control how much risk you will accept. That's not accidental. Now let's talk about the quiet transfer that happens underneath all of this. And this is a big one too. Risk. The company controls the freight, they control the rates, they control the customers, they control dispatch, they control the compliance standards. You carry the tax burden, you carry the insurance exposure, you carry downtime, fuel volatility, equipment liability, regulatory penalties. They keep the authority and you absorb all the consequences. You see, that's not shared risk. This is what we call risk dumping. And risk dumping is always paired with control. Because if you actually carried the risk and controlled the decisions, that would be real independence. But if you carry the risk while someone else controls the system, that's exploitation. And none of this spread by accident. It's kind of crazy when you really start putting it all together and thinking about it. This model expanded because it cut payroll costs, it avoids workers' compensation, it reduces liability exposure, it increases leverage over drivers, it creates cheaper labor without calling it that. No overtime, no benefits, no long term responsibility. And when something goes wrong, guess what? That blame flows in one direction. Didn't make money? You didn't work hard enough. Bad week? You didn't manage it right. Too many deductions? Well, that's the cost of business. Ask structural questions? You're negative. You're weak. You're not cut out for it. You see, that framing is intentional. That's the guys that you see on our threads that say these things about defending companies like, you're too lazy to work. If you hadn't been lazy, you would have made more money. Because if the system is never wrong, the driver always is. Now, let me be very clear here because people love to twist this part. We are not anti 1099, okay? And we are not anti W 2. We have both here at BRN. We are anti control without transparency, anti risk without authority, anti structures designed to trap drivers. I don't care about titles. Titles do not matter to me. The structure does. And this is the line every driver needs to understand because it cuts through all of the noise. If you do not control your work, your money, your decisions, and your exit, you are not independent. You are just cheaper labor wearing the costume of freedom. I hate to say that to you guys, that this is probably the most brutal truth you're ever going to hear someone talk about when it comes to this. And here at Big Rig Nation, I'm going to keep exposing this, not because it's popular, not because it's easy, but because drivers need and deserve to understand the system they're actually operating inside of. Control without accountability is the abuse. And once you see this, you'll never unsee it again.